It's important to work on something that really hooks your curiosity.
Pick your favorite research problem.
Try to come up at least with the type of questions that you're interested.
Then the rest will kind of happen naturally.
It might take a lot of time to find such a topic.
Ask your advisor.
Getting the problem from somebody else is already a great help.
Work on something that your advisor is familiar with.
There's no one way of doing it.
Listen to many talks.
Watch talks from conferences.
Write a paper.
Reading a lot.
Reading a lot of introductions.
It's only when you understand the related works better than the authors.
There are many ways of growing.
Even starting with some simple questions.
As long as you're learning stuff along the way.
Well, I think the most important thing is to be very excited by whatever problem you're looking at. So I think just, reading a lot of introductions from papers on ePrint, ones that have appeared at reputed venues, and just seeing which is the one that excites you the most. So I would say that that's the way to go.
Ask your advisor. You need to trust your advisor. They have done it before, so they have ample experience. So they're going to advise you suitably.
My first project I started, I think Tal, who's my advisor, gave me, I was a master's student actually at the time. And so I told her I wanted to do research because I was curious I was thinking about PhD and I wanted to sort of, explore. So she gave me like 3 papers to read and said, which do you like? And then we'll sort of start. And so I read these 3 papers, and the one that generated the most questions for me. So those are the questions that we started pursuing, I guess. So yeah, I think maybe some advisors are a bit more heavy-handed. I think for me though, at the beginning, I really cast a pretty wide net, and this was very important for me. But this was important for me, and other students are not the same. So I like to work on a lot of different things at the same time. This helps because, right, a lot of them fail. So it's like maybe you have one that's like progressing at any given point in time, even though like collectively, like, most of them aren't working. But a lot of other people can't manage this and like to concentrate on one specific problem at a time. I don't know what I would advise. You should do whatever engages you best, so that you don't. Yeah, the more you can, whatever encourages you to work on it more is the tack I would take. How do you find a first project? Yeah, I guess I think it's very important to work on something that your advisor is familiar with. I think that this is incredibly important at the beginning. I would not sort of set out trying to do something completely independently at the beginning. Even if you write the paper by yourself, at least like have someone nearby that's senior that can sort of guide you. Is this interesting or not? Because it's important to speak to someone with more perspective.
Well, I guess something general that I can say is that at least in the beginning, I think that, like learning is at least as valuable as solving. Okay, so when you approach a problem, especially if it's, a difficult problem, seems to be a challenging problem, then, you're going to gain something from research as long as you learn things along the way. Okay, you read literature, you come up with ideas, you try to figure out what is known in this area. You will learn stuff, and I think that even if eventually it will be like a dead end, then there's still value to this experience, and you'd be surprised, but you think sometimes that you get to a dead end, and then you sort of like go back to this problem, like even like after a year or maybe 2 years, sometimes after more, and you make progress. And you know, sometimes you're working on a problem for 10 years and eventually you may or may not solve it. But you know, as long as you're learning stuff along the way, that then you know, you feel that you're making progress, then you know, you should feel good about it. I think.
Really many good, useful, valid ways of choosing one's own first research project. So it depends a little bit on what motivates you and what drives you at the moment. And I think that in a way, as long as there is motivation, it's a good project. It's a project that will help to grow as a researcher. And for me, the goal of the first research project is maybe primarily to grow as a researcher. And so there are many ways of growing as a researcher. So it can be related to being a project that targets certain technical skills. For example, you might be interested in proving the security of very complex protocols, and you want to look at this skill. It might be that you want to understand some questions conceptually, so you'll study the questions and the notions and the relations between them. It might be that that you're driven by the practical applications of something, that this is something that motivates you and that you care about, and hopefully you're also in an environment where you work with people who you trust and with whom you can share your feelings of inadequacy, because I think that feeling inadequate is somehow very, very, very important part of research, because it means doing something that is really that helps the self growth, but also means it's something that is not so well understood or not so known that the path to go there is not very clear. And if we can support each other with our inadequacies in research, I think that's key to stepping beyond this.
Pick your favorite research problem to work on.
I guess that may also depend a lot on how they interact with their mentors, advisors, and what's their mentor or advisor style. Okay, so maybe let me say kind of the way I try to advise my students. So I would. So yeah, as mentioned, when I ask them to review papers, they will be forced to think about what's a new idea, and usually I let them read the paper and then try to present to me, and then try to discuss about how to evaluate those papers. So I think in such interactive discussion, I think they would be forced to learn how to kind of identify the new ideas in the paper and how to judge them. So in addition to review paper, I think when we have a research question and they read the paper on those topics, I would try to of course, also let them to present the paper and then try to maybe tell them how to internalize the paper. Like when you, I think especially in crypto, we talk about a lot of security gain reduction, interaction between many parties. It's very kind of operational. When we kind of really understand the paper, usually there will be some very high-level, concise summary, maybe a few sentences that we can explain to other experts about kind of what's the key insight, what's new in the paper. And that's usually difficult for students, but that's something that I would try to kind of force them a little bit to do.
Simplest advice is to just make sure that you're around people who are people you enjoy spending time with and people who you think are doing interesting work and reading interesting things and having good conversations. I feel like if you're around a group of people who are thinking about the right kinds of problems and questions and who are going to expose you to the right kinds of ideas, then the rest will kind of happen naturally. So I think the most important thing for me is just making sure that the people I'm talking to on a daily basis are people who I both enjoy talking with and who will push me to do better work.
I mean, one starting point is to watch talks from conferences, right? There you're really seeing which work, which research directions get attention. And now, of course, this might mean some of them are crowded. And if you start working on one specific topic, maybe someone else who's more seasoned than you will have the same result that you're looking for faster than you, but in a way, it's a trade-off, right? Either you can work on some fringe topic where it's just a small sub-community who works on this, then it might be harder to get the results published. And if you go into the most hypey topic, then you might get scooped, right? So you really have to sort of strike a balance somehow. I mean, if I recall my how things worked for me, so the one of the first problems I started working on was on doing composable security with hardware tokens. So there you have as a cryptographic model where you assume someone can issue tamper-proof hardware, which is not necessarily trusted, and the other party can use it. This was not the most centered topic, but there were still, when I got into this, a lot of cool open problems left. And I got all these results published, mostly at TCC. So this was not like a bottom tier conference, but sort of, let's say, one of our for theory cryptographers, sort of our best specialized conference. So this did get some did receive some recognition, but most importantly, it really showed me how to work, how to approach problems. This was again a somewhat less contested area, and I could really gather some experience there on how to write papers, how to approach a research question, how to collaborate with people. Probably the first problem you're gonna work on will be given to you by your advisor, right? So this is sort of some inherited thing that people sort of tend to work what people around them are already working on, and it was the same for me, right? Something really big. I mean, I think there's always the risk of overwhelming a student and causing frustration, right? So as an advisor, one thing that I want to avoid at all costs, which is not always possible, which will happen, which did happen to me, is getting frustrated, right? If you're working like on your first project, you have very high hopes, and then things don't work out. This can cause a good deal of frustration, which, yeah, you as an advisor need to somehow try to compensate for.
So in most cases, the student doesn't really know a lot in this area. And the first project is something that is given by the advisor. So I do recommend to try reading some basic and fundamental results and try to come up at least with the type of questions that you're interested in. So at least the advisor, if it has or she has multiple questions, potential questions, we would know what type of question to give you.
Yeah, I think the best idea, not only for the first project, but maybe especially for the first project, is just reading a lot. You know, trying to see as much of the picture as you can, and also reading. I usually advise students to ask questions while they read, like why the paper defines something in this way or the other. Also, it's always good to, you know, there are all these papers that present, for example, protocol with 6 different properties, and it is always good to ask, okay, do we know how to handle if we only want a subset of these properties? Like, what's the most basic combination here that is not trivial? So to try to question a lot. And another thing that I advise my students is, you know, while reading the papers, try to stop like every page or two, try to predict what's going to be written in the next page. Like, you know, if it's before a proof, can you see where is it going? Can you do the proof yourself? It is good for many things. It shows you if you understand well. It gives you confidence that you can generate such proofs by yourself. So, you know, good reading of papers is always useful, and especially when you just start. So, yeah, I guess that would be my advice to the students. Also, by the way, in first projects, I often give students papers without asking them a concrete question about this paper. And often students can come up with good questions by themselves, because, you know, asking questions is not something that you need to know too much of a background. You don't need techniques or so. Asking questions like everybody can do. Of course, some of these questions can be either known or difficult or many other things, but just coming up with questions, often students can come up with interesting questions that I didn't think about even.
I would recommend doing both things. So it's also important to learn how to come up with good problems and how to pick the problems. So you should do that too. So you should do both things. But in some sense, getting the problem from somebody else is already a great help. And usually if the problem is given to you, there's been already some thinking that went into the selection of the problem, and it's hard to appreciate it as a student. You don't see how much thinking goes into coming up with a problem and then proposing the problem to somebody else. For the advisor, often the hardest part is to give the problem to the student and then stop working on it, because you want the student to work on it and solve it rather than solving it yourself before then. So it's I don't know. That's it.
The important thing is to choose a topic that you really like. And it might take a lot of time to find such a topic. You might need to read a lot of papers to decide You might also have some failures before you find the topic that you really like. However, at the end of the day, you will see that this process will be very beneficial for you. It will let you find out by yourself the projects that you like. And from my experience, every time that somebody gave me a project that I didn't like, I didn't work on it, I didn't solve it, because I didn't like it. And always I was trying to find some variants of this problem to make it fit more to my interests. So I would say again that it's very important to spend time to find the topic that you really like.
So I think probably the first thing you should do before starting a research project is to listen to many talks and to kind of read a good selection of papers in order to get acquainted with different areas and to understand what is usually the motivation behind different topics and behind different questions. I think you should talk to your advisor at least about the different areas and the different research questions and their potential. If possible, talk to more people than your advisor. Talk to people who are the authors of these papers and try to find out what motivates them and what makes them excited and interested about the questions that they work on. And above all, choose something that excites you and that you can't stop thinking about this problem, because you will be spending a lot of time working on this problem. So I think that's in general something that if you're doing a PhD, you should be excited and it should want to spend time working on the projects that you're involved with. So definitely that should be one of the main motivations that leads you, is something that you want to work on and that you're excited about.
Yeah, so the first project actually came out of a talk that my advisor was giving, where I forget if it was a class or a talk he was giving about a paper, a recent paper of his. And actually it started with a question about something fairly minor. Could you improve this paper in this way, or maybe even get an incomparable result that would be simpler? It was a fairly minor question, but it was something that wasn't addressed in the paper, and my advisor Evgeny thought this was an interesting thing to explore. And pretty quickly we had some idea on how to do this. So I would say it wasn't actually a big question that we started it with. It was something, pretty small point in a paper, but even that was really interesting, and actually it kind of snowballed from there. So we came up with this initial idea, then we realized it has more connections, connected it to some other works, and eventually it actually turned into a really nice paper, even though I would say it started with something that wasn't like a big question or big result in the beginning. So I would say that that's my advice, that especially for the first project early on, even starting with some simple questions just as a way of learning an area yourself and getting some confidence is actually worthwhile.
I think that especially at first, it's important to work on something that really hooks your curiosity, which you're excited to spend time thinking about, to the point of maybe it keeping you up at night. For me, this hasn't always been the same as finding the most important or high impact problem, and that's something I've been struggling with.
First, I think you get prepared for cryptography. Attend a crypto course at the graduate level and master it with very good scores. Second, find the right topic of your interest, maybe together with your supervisor, and read the related literature. In the end, it's only when you understand the related works better than the authors, you may have new ideas on how to proceed with this project.
The advice is to give them to explore an area that either they know because they studied it and are interested in going deeper and reading papers about it, or getting a subject and a list of papers to start reading, and then especially if the professor suspects that there are ways to improve the paper or other improvements in the area, like changing models to something that is more realistic, or making it more efficient, or making it more suitable for applications, or it may be something to implement, it may be something to analyze, it may be something to develop theoretically around or practically around. And there's no magic bullet about it. There's no one way of doing it. Every person is different. But if the area is relatively new or relatively with a renewed interest, there should be enough material on doing it and reading papers, and it's, of course, it's also different if you do cryptanalysis and then you do crypto primitive development, but in principle, what I say is a good way to start.